In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern where we are watching the medium to long range. Obviously, we know that a big cooldown is coming and pretty much here already. That is going to last through about the 23rd. We are going to see a gradual warm up through Christmas into the period after that should last 4 or 5 days at least. But the early to mid-January timeframe is still up in the air, and we do have a lot of model guidance that we're going to be showing you today that suggests that we are going to see colder times ahead for the month of January. Even diving into two long-range models that suggest the month of January could be very, very frigid. That's going to be towards the end of the video. Obviously, there is some opportunities for snowfall within this video off and on, including one coming up over just the next couple of days where light to moderate snowfall could occur for some of the mid-Atlantic and northeast. That storm is still pretty well offshore. It has not trended as far west as it possibly could have, but we have seen some amount of snowfall expected at this point. It's going to be pretty minimal though. Into Christmas, mid-Atlantic, northeast, Ohio Valley, we could see, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day snowfall happening in there. And then afterwards, there's a few shots as well. Let's take a look first off at the past 20 days, which is now one final day of November into the rest of December. So we're seeing basically the entirety of December so far here. And we see that a lot of the cold has been directed from the northern plains, upper Midwest, straight into the eastern states throughout this month. We've seen overall warmer temperatures for eastern Canada, which is pretty indicative of a negative NAO. I don't want to dive into that too much, but that is what that means if you are familiar with that. It's not too crucial when we're looking at the past especially. But what is more crucial is this positive PNA out west that has been staggering throughout the month of December here. And these two warm areas is what has basically forced this cold straight towards the East Coast so far this month. So throughout the video, be paying attention to the west, even if you live in the east, because whether it's warm or cold will dictate what we see in the east. For the west, it has been warmer and less stormy, but we do expect stormier and colder times here for the after Christmas time frame in particular. So let's take a look here at our GFS model. First off, diving into this, and this is going to be the warmer of our two models. The European model has consistently been the colder model for a month plus now, and it has been correct almost every time in showing the colder conditions and snowier conditions. As we just take a look at later on this evening, we do see a pretty substantial clipper system here across the northern plains and upper Midwest that has moved down from Canada. This is bringing light to moderate snowfall to states like the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Michigan here. Could bring some lighter accumulations up to, I would say, 3-4 inches. It is a quicker moving system, as much of clippers are, but definitely something to pay attention to. Also, for the East Coast light to moderate snowfall threat, this is the northern piece of energy we've been tracking, the southern piece being off the southeast coast here. And these are going to draw closer and closer together. It's this southern piece that just wants to linger just too far offshore to see anything too major here. Now, last night into the overnight hours, we did see the NAM model, NAM, show some gradual increases of snowfall for especially New England, southern New England, into like New York City and New Jersey. Unfortunately for cold and snow lovers in there, that has kind of backed off with the 12Z runs today. It was showing upwards of, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, maybe more for southern New England, New Jersey, New York City, which was a big surprise and had the opportunity to be that western trend that we've been thinking could happen. But basically it backed off for the 12Z run. We could see that gradually try to move back, but the clock is ticking, so I wouldn't bet on anything at this point, obviously, as far as any substantial snowfall, except these areas impacted by the clipper. Now, as we move towards tomorrow, because there's not really much else happening around the nation, this is when that southern piece of energy takes over, and we see 1,002. It is closer to the coast than we've seen a lot of model guidance throughout this storm, but you can see that this only really leads to light to moderate snowfall for Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, portions of Maryland, perhaps, New York, New England here. It's very spread out. This northern piece of energy still has a lot of low pressure in here, so it's a pretty broad system, but that usually leads to less intense areas of snowfall like we see here. Obviously, when looking at just the temperature pattern overall, I mean, it's pretty clear that we have a very warm pattern for the west, which again is that classic positive PNA look. And we have the cold directing its way towards the east here. So it is cold enough for snowfall. That is not the problem whatsoever. It's this low is relatively weak and far offshore. If it was just here, let's say, you would be looking at a very different story. And I mean, that black L that I'm drawing here is not very far away from where the actual low is. It's just too close to happening for any major changes likely. If we were still, 3 days away, 4 days away, this would be a major story right now, looking at the potential continued Western trends. But time is just running out, unfortunately. Everything's a little too progressive here. As we move on, we do see that this GFS model wants to show a little bit more going on here for southeastern New England. This could lead to an inch or two of snowfall, but again, nothing major from what I'm seeing here. Cold continues for Saturday, maybe even worsens with some snow showers across the northeast. Meanwhile, we also have a storm system moving onshore to the northwest with some snowfall for the Cascades and Sierra Nevada, rainfall along the coast here. As we move on towards Sunday, the 22nd, what we're seeing is continued cold for this eastern region, but again, it's going to be moving out here. We see snow and some colder conditions here. This is going to force this warm air eastward, which will spell the end of this cool down over time. It's going to be a pretty slow transition, though. By Sunday, we've made some progress in moving it out, but not the most ever. I want to kind of recap because this starts out over the northern plains and upper Midwest with some snowfall, more like a clipper system again. Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin once more. That's for Monday morning at about 1 a.m. Would hardly call it the morning. 1 p.m. here, just 12 hours later, we do see Wisconsin, Michigan, upper peninsula Michigan there, especially seeing heavy snowfall for a brief period. As we keep going towards Tuesday, which will be Christmas Eve, we do see overnight, especially the 23rd into the 24th. This is 10 a.m. We're seeing snowfall throughout portions of the Ohio, or better yet, the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast here, even moderate to heavy snowfall in some spots. So again, another opportunity for some snowfall. It's not looking super major at this point, but definitely some snowfall appears to be possible very close to Christmas. We do take a look at the Northwest where there is that storm still raging on. We see for the Cascades, Sierra Nevada, Northern Rockies, this could spell snowfall. For more lower areas, more in the way of rainfall is what we would expect, obviously. As we move overnight Christmas Eve into Christmas, we have some lingering snow showers by 10 a.m. around, but most of it is said and done. Still quite cold for the Northeast especially, but warming the further south you are in these eastern parts. For the Northwest, we do see a big time cooling trend here for Christmas Day with some Rocky Mountain snowfall occurring. Could be a white Christmas for some folks there. As we keep going towards Thursday, which will be the 26th, we see this snowfall dramatically worsens for the Rockies, Cascades, Sierra Nevada, as we have a 983 very close to like Vancouver here. And that is causing a lot of this major snowfall out west. We do see some snowfall for the upper Midwest here, which is definitely something that we've been watching for. This upcoming pattern seems pretty supportive of that. We do see another low set up. This is for Friday afternoon, and this is a 994, a pretty substantial low. This one wants to move up something like this, and I think that the potential for snowfall in this pocket here especially is pretty large for that after Christmas time frame. So we're going to be watching that closely. Also watching for numerous severe weather threats in this kind of south central corridor over the coming weeks, just based on the jet stream pattern. Right now it's kind of messy, but there is warmer air to the east here and some cooler push from the northwest that could create enough instability. Still pretty snowy in the mountainous west, the 993 near the coast of Washington, bringing continued snowfall out there. Let's take a look at what happens by Saturday. And this is when things get a lot more classic, and we see something that we can really work with here. 989 here for Iowa and Minnesota. Pretty decent cold front underneath. This could again spell thunderstorms and severe weather for this eastern area along that cold front. We do have the classic cold front, warm front look here, which is very, very supportive for thunderstorm activity underneath this warm front. So on the underneath side of that warm front and on the east side of the cold front. So if you're east of this line, south of this line, thunderstorms are a possibility with this type of setup. Continued snowfall, especially for the Rockies here, but also some of the Cascades there for Saturday the 28th. Sunday the 29th here, what we see is that a lot of this storminess moves towards the east coast. They really need it, so this is good news. 998 here, moving on toward northern California, bringing Sierra Nevada, Cascade, Rocky snowfall there. Continued snow. We do see a little bit of some signs of a positive PNA in the west. It usually starts with the southwest portions, and we do see some warmth here, but there is equal amounts of cold to the north, so it's a neutral PNA, you might say. But we do see the majority of this cold is actually pouring towards the east near this New Year's time frame. High amounts of precipitation in the east there for this 29th setup. By Monday the 30th, this is what we're seeing. And the PNA is going to be the biggest factor here. We see it kind of worsen again as far as a negative PNA is concerned. So we see snowfall and cold kind of trending back in. The warmth moving eastward here rapidly. And this cool down is not really able to fully move in. I would say most of it is actually moving back up and around the East Coast area. So this is not the prettiest setup for warm in the west, cold in the east as far as Monday the 30th is concerned. We do have a very strong low, 977 there near Maryland, I would say, or southern PA, maybe northern Virginia. And this brings heavy snowfall to the Appalachian Mountain Range like Ohio, West Virginia, Western Virginia, the Smoky Mountains as well. But this is a pretty messy looking storm. I wouldn't put too much stock into this. That continues to bring snowfall, especially for Canada, but also the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And then, after January 1st, we continue to see the very, very cold trend along the west here, which is just going to be a pure negative PNA if this model was correct. And we see the majority of the milder temperatures are still around for the east, even after New Year's on this GFS model. Again, we're going to have some contradicting data here in a minute that shows quite the opposite of this after New Year's. We get another low trying to set up here. We obviously know that the jet stream is doing this. So you would be watching for all of these areas for potential snowfall with any low that moves along the jet stream. So we're seeing Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, Kansas. I think in this type of pattern, this wouldn't be too far-fetched. Keep in mind, this is very long out, though, so major changes will occur. But seeing storms develop near the southern end of that jet stream isn't a shocker. And we get another upper Midwest snowstorm perhaps around the early January timeframe if we get some low pressure again set up along that jet stream, which is now doing something like this. Keep in mind that this is about the end of the model run. We're about to get there, but Friday the 3rd, we see other signs of this positive PNA moving back in. Meanwhile, we have this low here with a cold front underneath. This could be enough to push the cold air back into the eastern states, these two major factors. But for now, again, upper Midwest, another potential snowstorm. That moves out. This PNA continues to intensify a little bit here across the southwest, again, where it usually starts. And this cold air is now centered over the kind of central states and on the move eastward. So I would say a cold pattern in the east we're kind of on the doorstep of it here on this GFS model. The European model, again, is going to get us there, actually. So here's that Clipper system. Here's the offshore system, and we actually see a similar look to the GFS. So this is one win for the GFS. It's been the one consistently showing light to moderate snowfall over the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, perhaps Ohio Valley with this system. And now the European model is also kind of showing that. So we're getting some good agreement there. We do see the continued cold for the coming days. And then here comes that kind of Christmas Eve system. Again, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, a little lighter on that model. And then we get milder. The West continues to flourish as far as really cold and snowy conditions go. But right at the end here, something interesting happens. I mean, we are in the same jet stream pattern we watched on the GFS model here, just like that. But we get a low between the Hudson Bay and Great Lakes here. We get some warmer push. We can see these bars are pushing northward. So we know the warmth is kind of pushing northward here along this area. And this is what ends up expanding that positive PNA very, very quickly. So this is Wednesday the 1st here, and we see right after New Year's, that cold starts to push eastward along that low that moves in between the Hudson Bay and Great Lakes. Cold front pulls it, and we see this warmth able to move in for the West Coast, indicative of a starting out positive PNA. We actually end up with a pretty brutal eastern cool down here, perhaps with a coastal low moving in with it. We get some kind of transient snowfall for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast again for the early January timeframe. I want to get us right to the end of this model run because here's where we stand as far as Friday the 3rd is concerned on this European model. and we are back to a full-blown positive PNA pattern with a massive cooldown once again in the eastern states. So this would be huge. This would put us right back into what a lot of what we've seen in December. And I'm sure that if we move back into these colder patterns throughout January, that opportunities will arise for major snowstorms in the eastern half of the nation. So we're going to be just patiently awaiting that. So far, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like this winter has looked very different throughout December. Actually, what's happened, not just what we're predicting to happen, but what's happened in December so far has felt significantly different than anything we've seen in the past, like 5 winters. It's felt cold for a majority of the winter so far. December, obviously, we're very early in, but it has been a different feel throughout the wintertime. It's not felt like a challenge to get these cooldowns into the east. And actually, looking at it from a full picture, it seems kind of hard to get the cold to leave the east. It seems like that's what's struggling to happen on the models, which that's where we're very much the opposite from what we've seen in recent years, in my opinion, this winter. We'll see how January and February go. We're obviously only about 19 days into the meteorological winter, so very small sample size, and I don't want to speak too soon, but things have felt different, and the current guidance for January leads me to believe that we're going to see more of that. So we'll see what happens. December is almost locked in to end up being a colder than normal month in the east, looking back on it for the entire month. So that's going to be probably one of, I don't know, it might be the only cold winter month in the east that we've had overall since I've started doing YouTube. If not, it's like one of only 2 or 3. So pretty substantial stuff there. I can't believe I'm saying that, but that's just the facts. The precipitation, Northwest really seeing a lot of storms hammer in here to this corridor. And also we get a lot of rising storms throughout the Midwest and throughout the East. So this is going to be the main areas to watch for. When we look at the precipitation anomalies, we see that these are the areas that see above average precipitation. Then much of the East here as well that really need it. So this is a great look overall. Very La Nina looking. I mentioned throughout a lot of December that it didn't look like a La Nina at all, but this is kind of textbook La Nina stuff. Above average in the Northwest, above average in like the Midwest and Great Lakes and Ohio Valley here, more interior. The only thing is we don't really have the below average in the deeper south, southeast at least, but the southwest does look below average for sure. I have seen recent developments. The La Nina, we might officially get a La Nina here soon. Typically, it takes about a month for those effects to fully be felt. So that would put us in La Nina conditions officially for like the end of January timeframe. But it is a central-based La Nina, which is very different than most La Ninas that are east-based. You don't need to pay too much attention to the details. You're just going to have to take my word for it. But a central La Nina, central-based La Nina, is going to be very favorable for cold and snow in the east compared to an east-based La Nina. So it's not necessarily the worst news in the world. I still think we're acting much more as a neutral ENSO for right now, but it is looking more and more likely that we will see a La Nina for the late winter into the spring, whereas it was expected to start over the summer into the fall, but it never was able to really take off. Anyway, that was a lot of talking for just the precipitation anomalies. Let's look at the snowfall in the GFS. Again, the west does tremendous with the above average precipitation. Shouldn't come as a surprise whatsoever. I am watching this corridor very closely, as I mentioned to you guys, for maybe 1 or 2 major snow systems, especially around Christmas, after Christmas time frame. There will be about a week-long window at least where this area will be quite favorable, and I think we'll cash in on some plowable snowfall up there. And then for the Northeast Mid-Atlantic, we do get a couple of systems in here as well that lead to some plowable snowfall, especially in the interior Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. Now, the European model looks a little different, obviously. We get a lot, well, we get none for first off these areas in here where the GFS model has quite a bit, and we get a lot less for the Upper Midwest and Great Lakes. I think this model is underdoing these, so I don't think this is going to be that small of an amount, especially with how favorable this upcoming pattern is going to be. We do see quite a bit for the West, just like the GFS model, so that's basically on board. And the Northeast Mid-Atlantic area, I think this is a little bit more realistic, a little bit more marginal with the amounts, and none of these systems are quite major, so I don't expect any major accumulations with any of these systems that we're seeing over the next week or two. So for now, this is a better look in my opinion. Now, the temperature anomalies here on the GFS model, again, this is the warmer of the 2 models. We do get this major cooldown here from the 19th today. straight through the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. It wants to hang on through Christmas Eve and even a little bit of Christmas Day for some areas. The Northeast and Mid-Atlantic kind of stay cooler for a while, but this warm-up comes in a hurry, especially 26th, 27th, 28th. Looks quite mild, a lot like what we just saw recently. Now, the colder air starts to become a little bit more frequent and off and on here after the 30th time frame. Here's the 31st, here's the 1st, here's the 2nd, here's the 3rd. So a couple of days where you have like some spotty neutral temperatures out here, but we're really left with an overall warmer pattern here in the east, even by the 4th of January. It's warmer in the west though, so more indicative of a positive PNA, and the coldest temperatures are in between. I think that if we see these warmer temperatures out west, you're going to be looking for cold for a majority of these areas, not quite as much warmth as we're seeing here, if that warmth is in fact out there in the west. So that's my kind of breakdown of that. And I'm going to agree more with the European model here that we're going to watch. So let's see it play out. Again, cooler through the 23rd, very cold in some spots. And that lingers through Christmas for a couple of areas along the eastern seaboard, but we do warm up, especially 26th, 27th, 28th, so we get good agreement there. This model, it's straight through the 31st into the 1st, but here's the 2nd of December, clearly a pretty big cold shot there in the east, and we're seeing colder anomalies here. I really don't think that's what we're seeing based on the geopotential height, so I think there's an issue here with the model. But overall, I think this model is calling for more of a positive PNA, which would be more of a telling reason for why we're seeing these cold shots move in. We see one already in place. We already see number 2 on the way. So that's much more indicative of a positive PNA powerhouse in here, which it's neutral at worst here anyway. But I think there's going to be a little bit more warmth in there if we did see a pattern play out like what the European model is trying to show. That's for very early in January. Let's take a look at some long-range guidance, see what the long-range models want to show. And as we take a look here, I got to switch back to the previous run. Here we go. What we see is a warmer pattern overall. Here's the 25th through the 1st, exactly what we've been calling for and what the shorter range models have been calling for. But here's the 31st through the 7th of January, and we see a lot of this warmth kind of lifts off. We start to see colder for the west, southeast as well. And as we move towards the 7th through the 14th, this is when things just get kind of unleashed. Colder temperatures overall in the east. Also for the west, though, that's the confusing thing. Negative PNA, how do we end up with negative temperatures in the east as well? My breakdown of this is that that wouldn't happen. So is it going to be in the west or is it going to be in the east? And that is the biggest question mark here. This winter so far has told us that positive PNA has been the trend, so I would lean that way with colder in the east, but time will tell. There is some big question marks there. As we keep going, here's like the 21st through the 28th, still pretty neutral in the east, but still cold in the west. This model wants to just show continuous cold in the west. Here's your CFS model, another long-range model, and we're going to get pretty good agreement. Again, here is the 25th through the 1st of January, again, quite warm. And then right away, 1st through 8th of January, cold along the east coast again, warmer trending back in for the west. Then here's the 7th through the 14th, getting even colder for the east. Here's the 14th through the 24th or 21st, and we have warmth trending in for the west, more cold for the east. Then here's the 21st through the 28th, and we once more kind of move back into a colder pattern for the west, and a little less cold in the east. Again, it'll probably be one or the other, not both here. But I think it is realistic. You know, you usually don't see a positive PNA last a full month. So I like that this model is kind of rotating us back into a negative PNA pattern for a time. That is typically how things go. So this is a more realistic look for me. Let's see what happens afterwards, though. And we do move back more into a positive PNA look, I guess. A little messy here, but colder temperatures once again for the east once more. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. We will continue to break down the pattern. I know that if this is your first video, it seems a little confusing, but we are a little bit of a fork in the road right now, and oftentimes we do have a much better handle on the pattern, but there is a lot of possibilities moving forward, and I don't see it as one set in stone path right now at all, other than the cooldown that's coming up for the next few days, the warm-up that follows for Christmas through about maybe the 1st of January, and then it's big question marks afterwards. So it's an exciting time to get involved, though, and start paying attention and subscribing for daily weather videos, because we get to kind of figure out together what's going to happen for January, and I'm really looking forward to that. So be sure to subscribe. Be sure to hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.